A very good evening to you. Time now for us to do business on News 360 with me, Nana Ikia Mensa Abrampa. Tonight we're looking at the local book industry. Lots of issues coming up with that particular industry, and we'll move on to the ports where we will be giving you some detail there. Let's quickly go for the detail now. And apart from energy being an issue in that particular industry, the local book industry has a lot of challenges, including a 40% tax on imported materials. Now, this notwithstanding, efforts are being made to improve the industry through a bill for a tax waiver currently before Parliament.
Over the past 2 decades, the local printing industry has witnessed several setbacks, one of which is government's introduction of taxes on imported printing materials. The 40% taxes levied on imported printing materials increased the cost of locally produced books. According to the Ghana Printers and Converters Association, this collapsed the printing industry, compelling employers to lay down hundreds of workers in the country.
In the past 3 years, job losses were terribly high. You wouldn't believe that the research showed that there were over 3,200 job losses in a 5-year period, and that various press houses were folding up because we have not been competitive in tendering at various government tenders for the print of textbooks.
But through the BUSAC fund, work has started on getting policymakers to give the local book manufacturers some relief. They initiated moves to remove over 40% of tax levy on printing materials before the end of June 2015. The initiative was reviewed by the Finance Minister, Seth Terkper, during his budget statement on the floor of Parliament, and was reiterated by President John Mahama. The Printers Association said this development is not only a major step to protect their businesses, but will enable them to face external competition.
With this, the local industry saw a glimmer of hope after a few years of being in weird darkness and groping in darkness, trying to find its bearing in the world of business.
Ghana's local book industry employs thousands of Ghanaians, creating allied jobs for several others.
All right, so those were stories we carried throughout the week. If you miss any of them within this week, same time next week, we'll be bringing all the highlights to you, so you catch every bit of it in the form of snippets. We're moving on to our topic for the weekend. We're looking at scrapping the over 40% tax on imported printing material, the benefits that we stand to get as a nation. If I'd give you some highlights of it, the local book industry has a lot of challenges, including 40% tax on imported materials. Now, notwithstanding, efforts are being made to improve the industry through a bill for a tax waiver currently before Parliament. I have some few gentlemen joining me in the studio to discuss this subject, and here we have James Appiah-Berko. James Appiah-Berko is the president of the Printers and Paper Converters Association. James, you are very much welcome into the studios.
Thank you.
We also have a member of Parliament in the studios. If you go to Nkwanta South, this is the member of Parliament, indeed very affable, and he represents the Parliamentary Committee on Education and Trade, Gershon Gbediameh. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Also. And then we have our resident analyst also in the studios. Well, today he's particularly significant to the subject because every now and then when I'm introducing him, I'll mention an author. He writes books, and then again, he's the CEO of GNA. Help me welcome Dr. Bernard Otabil, financial author.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so just before we get into the details, let's just quickly get into a story. We'll give you a fair understanding into what is happening. Now, the local book industry has its fair challenges. They've put a bill before Parliament. We'll take the details of the story. When we come back, we'll discuss the subject.
Over the past 2 decades, the local printing industry has witnessed several setbacks, one of which is government's introduction of taxes on imported printing materials. The 40% taxes levied on imported printing materials increased the cost of locally produced books. According to the Ghana Printers and Converters Association, this collapsed the printing industry, compelling employers to lay down hundreds of workers in the country.
In the past 3 years, job losses were terribly high. You wouldn't believe that the research showed that there were over 3,200 job losses in a 5-year period, and that various press houses were folding up because we have not been competitive in tendering at various government tenders for the print of textbooks.
But through the BUSAC fund, work has started on getting policymakers to give the local book manufacturers some relief. They initiated moves to remove over 40% of tax levy on printing materials before the end of June 2015. The initiative was reviewed by the Finance Minister, Seth Terkper, during his budget statement on the floor of Parliament and was reiterated by President John Mahama. The Printers Association said this development is not only a major step to protect their businesses, but will...
All right, so we had to just cut the story because we have all the main players right here in the studio, so we'll just get straight on to the discussions. James Appiah-Berko, you are the president, you know the challenges. Well, can you just show, it's at the point of in Parliament now that we're just waiting for it to get passed, but let me just get to you and find out, what were the difficulties you had in the past when you were having to pay this 40% tax on imported materials?
Just like you have said, we were paying taxes and VAT on inputs for the production of books, whilst books that are already either printed or produced outside entered our markets free of taxes and of VAT. What that meant was that the local printer was saddled with as much as over 42%, between 42 and 43% of the cost of production in excess of what was brought in from outside the country. This made it rather difficult for the local printer to compete with any book, any material, any completed or produced book that came from outside Ghana. It meant that for the same copy of book, if it was produced in this country, the Ghanaian printer would pay for every input to produce approximately 42% of the cost. And what that meant is that the local printer was down by approximately 42 or 43% in cost, and then he would be more expensive than books that were printed outside.
In simple language, this made you uncompetitive.
Extremely uncompetitive.
Let me come to the Member of Parliament. Yes, they have a case in there, but government needs money to be able to run the economy. Now, and my question to you, do you believe that Parliament should remove the over 40% as he's talking about, but while government really needs money to run the economy, where then do we get the money from?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my first point of contact with the Printers and the Paper Converters Association was at a workshop or one of the advocacy stakeholders meeting conference which they had at the Nat Hall. And it was there, it was laid bare, the trouble or the difficulties they were going through. And I, as a member of the Trade Committee, advised that if they have a challenge, we have a committee in Parliament responsible for trade matters. So when they come and engage the committee and explain issues, and we understand them, then we'll be able to summon the minister, and the minister may also see wisdom in what we are saying, and then the necessary laws will be made. And to say that because we have reduced the tax by 40% and therefore government may lose revenue, it's not completely right, because if they are not in business, one, we are looking for jobs for our people. So it's not only getting money into the kitty that is most important. You want to make yourself, your people comfortable. So if by reducing this by 40%, we create more jobs, like say about 3,000 jobs, then we also have some relief. Apart from that, if they're also in production, they are business, therefore they still pay tax. So when we aggregate all these things, I think that government eventually will gain, if not twofold, by giving job and also by the tax that they pay.
I'll come back to you and get details of the merits you had to consider as parliamentarians. But let me go to someone who has had to write books and publish them probably. Dr. Otabil, I want your experience. Did you print here in Ghana, or you decided I can print abroad? And sometimes for you, the writer, the author of the books, which is more advisable to do?
Well, this is quite a tough one, but I'll go for the direct answer first. Yes, first of all, I've printed here in Ghana before.
Okay.
I know dealing with the little leaks that that keep you poor. It was printed here, right here in Ghana.
Okay.
By a very young, vibrant guy. But then, I owned a publishing company, Trans-Africa Publishing, and indeed, for most of the things that we did there were printed out of Ghana. We did that in Malaysia. And we had a guy called Stephen Yep, he was a schoolmate. I'm an MBA student, and MBA student mate, and he was helping out. But indeed, it is really expensive to print out of this, economy at this point in time. The issue, as you rightly pointed out, is the issue of competitiveness, and I think that the printers would have to look at it, quite holistically, because it's a supply chain approach. I remember way back in 2004, I think Professor Okine, what's his name? The president of Power, Atuku Okine, made similar suggestions when he was inaugurating a board. He said quite clearly that indeed there should be some element of innovation and marketing from the publisher's side that would, more or less, I would add, that would feed through to the printers as well. Now, if you look at what happens in the other countries, China, Asia, and that sort of thing, it's all to do with the cost of production, really. And they have a much lower cost of production. Cost of labor might be much cheaper. Then the other aspect is also to do with the printers, how much cost they have to bear in order to import the raw materials into this country, where they also fight other economic factors as well. You're looking at it from the depreciating currency and so on and so forth. And having served on some of the ministerial kind of tender review boards, I can tell you for a fact that we did a tender for one of the state-owned media organizations on even paper import. And by the time we went through the tender process and the tender had been awarded, whoever got the tender was already racing against the currency, which had depreciated so badly. So in this case, if this guy was to be publishing his own books or newspapers or whatever it is, he would have to feed that through to the final consumer. Now, the indirect tax element really is that if we want to open up, and just this weekend, I mean, we had the ex-president Kufuor at the Appiah-Berko School when he was launching a book that had been written by one of the old students, saying that we need to really go back and try to get people to write a bit more, so that posterity would also be reading from what has happened in our country. Now, with a very dwindling reading habit, it's quite, a challenge if we should have such high cost of, production locally, which means that it would, affect not just the publishers like myself, but also would affect the printers.
I'm sure you have all the facts there, and Honorable Gershon is just nodding to it. So let me come to you, President of the Printers. Indeed, if this 40% is waived on, in just a few minutes, just highlight you and your people how this is likely to help you.
One, what it means is that raw material cost will come down by 42 to 43%. And raw materials constitute approximately 27% of our production cost. What that means is that our production cost could be coming down by about 27%. And if production cost comes down by 27%, it goes without saying that profitability is likely to go up, and we are able to become a little more or a lot more competitive than if we did not have the slash of 42% in taxes.
you've laid it very clearly, just giving us an understanding that indeed this will translate into more revenue for you. Gershon, as a nation, those who are bringing it in equally have their challenges, where the city is hardly biting them. But what can we do as a nation, since you stand for education also in Parliament, to get a win-win situation in both directions, where books can come into the country, would encourage more people to write, like the former president is requesting, that as a people we would be able to create more opportunities for learning?
Yeah, I think that, like we are saying, when the advocacy was going through, a lot more people were involved and they saw wisdom in what they are saying. We believe that if this tax waiver is given to them, the industry will expand. Like my colleague is saying, more books will be printed, many more people will benefit. And like I'm saying, we are not only conscious of money. After all, whatever money we get, it is to be spent by the people to make them happy. So if we are able to create more jobs and the people are happy, the government is also happy. Therefore, I think,
at which stage are we now, so long as...
Now, we have enacted the act.
Okay.
But after the statement by the Minister for Finance of the 40% slash, he followed it up with an act. Now, for every act, there is an enabling legislative instrument which will spell out the nitty-gritties of how the act must be implemented. And that is the stage where we are now.
Dr. Otabil, I'll come back to you shortly. But let me use 1 minute to just find out from you. So how did advocacy help in this process throughout? How did advocacy help?
Well, it brought the awareness to various stakeholders, the need to understand the direction of the industry and the effect of implementing various policies that augment and help the growth of the industry, and also bring down cost and boost the industry by creating jobs and releasing some money into the economy and the like.
Dr. Otabil, you would want to write more, and I'm sure you would want to publish here in Ghana or print here in Ghana so that we'll create more jobs. What should be the way forward for all of us as a country?
Well, the way forward, I mean, my advice to them is that indeed, if there is a waiver, how does it feed through to the publisher, right, or to the writer? I mean, it's not a case of albeit that once there's a waiver and therefore the prices or whatever the cost will go down. It's not really the case at all times. Now, what it shows that writers themselves wouldn't have gotten into a stage whereby they are so much disinterested in the whole work of printing, and therefore they wouldn't want to go to them. And it's a simple advice. I mean, there's so much innovation going on these days. And if you look at the reading habit itself, it's going down by the day. And people are migrating from hard paper reading to soft, to all kinds of, we have all this technology convergence issue. And whereas we have the Kindle and all these kind of
the school
devices,
children are included also, they would have to be writing. So paperwork is still, I'm sure, very relevant.
It is, but then there's this whole idea about how people are now feeding on information now.
Okay.
And it will surprise you that not everyone is interested in the book, open book in order to read and to acquire knowledge. People acquire knowledge through all kinds of means. So the printers themselves must also infuse into all of this that kind of innovation that would ensure that indeed people would see their services are quite beneficial. Because a lot of migration is taking place. People are moving on, and people are becoming publishers by the day, using PDF formats and desktop publishing and all kinds of means, which makes it even quite difficult for even the most endowed in terms of financial resources to go to a printer to print. People test the market now with soft copies before they go into printing hard copies. And now there's also what we call the print on demand. How prepared are they, to really be able to satisfy the needs that we publishers would want to find? So it's a kind of a balancing act.
So this is a need of somebody who really writes. I mean, I know you want to react to it, but Honorable, just within few seconds, did advocacy really help the parliamentarians? Did it really bring you together?
It really, to me as a person who was there, it opened.
Where were you?
I mean, at the forum where we were invited for the first time.
BUSAC, I'm sure.
Yeah, and I think it helped us to push their agenda forward. And
so advocacy really played a game.
It really played a game.
Okay.
There are a lot of things people don't know. You know, in Parliament, we work more in committees. Now, at the committee level, people can submit memoranda, written memoranda. People can come physically and explain issues, unlike on the floor of their house. So if you want an issue to be well understood, you see, then you engage the committee.
Okay.
When the committee members are well engaged and understood the issues, they will invite the minister. Then the minister will also carry it to cabinet, and then it comes out. So people should not shy away from coming to the various committees in Parliament.
I'm very grateful, gentlemen, and the Honourable Member of Parliament also emphasizing that advocacy is key here. When you engage in strong advocacy, it brings them, the parliamentarians, together. I've been interacting with James Appiah-Berko, who's the president of the Printers and Paper Converters Association. So, James, many thanks for joining us. Indeed, we are grateful for your time, and indeed, it's been passed now. We pray that you make the best out of it. Gershon Gbediameh is a member of Parliament who is also on the Committee of Education and Trade in Nkwanta South MP. We're sincerely grateful, and we believe that you would maintain your seat through and through. Let's just also appreciate Dr. Bernard Otabil, a financial author. He writes books, so he understands the subject. I pray he would not be printing from Malaysia anymore. Let's do the local one. Let's create more jobs for Ghanaians. He's also the CEO of the Ghana News Agency. Sincerely, we're grateful, gentlemen, and I'm sure the advocacy would continue. Thank you very much for staying with us 1 week.